I'm Caroline Woolley of Meaden and More Forensic Accountants. This is the next in the video interview series. It's called Business Interruption and Other Stories. And I'm interviewing interesting people I've met along the way over the last 20 odd years. And today I'm interviewing Cath Whitaker, who I first met in London and then in Singapore, and she's traveled the world and worked in various places around the world. Insurance and risk industry, I work with her at Marsh, and she's just recently become CEO of a firm called SelfWealth, and she's gone back to Australia. So I thought it'd be interesting to see this transition and hear from Cath, and she's just going to join now. We've just been having a good catch up, and I'll let Cath in, and she'll be with us shortly. Here she is. Hi, Cath. Hello there. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks very much for having me, Caroline. It's great to be here.
I did a very quick introduction, and I just thought I'd give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and what you're doing now. But I was just saying that we first met at Marsh in London and then Singapore, but you've traveled the world and been to lots of places, but you're back home in Australia and CEO of SelfWealth. So congratulations on that. And it was a recent thing, the CEO. I think you're a few months in. I just wanted to initially, maybe you could do an introduction to SelfWealth and what you're doing and some of the innovation and breakthroughs.
Absolutely, and thank you, Caroline. So yes, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of SelfWealth. SelfWealth, for just under a decade now, has been helping Australians build wealth. We started off by offering the ability for retail investors to buy and sell Australian equities via a flat fee model, which was unheard of at the time. So a flat $9.50 per transaction fee. We then moved into US equities, which we launched late last year, which, when you consider the timing of the meme stocks happening in February, really helped catapult SelfWealth in terms of its growth trajectory. We're now proud to offer minor account functionality as well. So allowing parents, guardians, etc., set up accounts for their children, or aunties and uncles, for nieces and nephews. And it's all about getting people to understand wealth creation, and some of the financial literacy components of building wealth. In Australia, we're now number 5, so we're challenging the big 4 banks, and very, very pleased to say that we've got close to 100,000 active traders on our platform.
Of all ages. That's amazing to introduce people to this, and obviously sounds very open. And it's quite a difference to where you've come from. It's a new industry, but also this role of CEO. I mean, family must obviously be very proud, and you must be proud of yourself, but it's all on you, isn't it now? No pressure, but it's to take on that role is amazing.
Absolutely. And look, it's a privilege to be the CEO. I like to think it's been a combination of 20 years of life experiences. As you've mentioned, those life experiences have been gained predominantly in risk management and insurance across 5 different countries. And when I think about, the multitude of people that I've met along that way, when I think about the challenges that have been faced in terms of, crisis mode all the way through to, looking at new product development and deployment, each of those experiences has really enabled me to build the skill set necessary to be a leader.
And, from a risk and insurance background, does that set you in good stead, do you think? Is that quite a nice background for what you're doing now?
It does. Like, for me, risk management and insurance, it is one of the most strategic careers that you can ever go into. You know, to think about that, you know, holistically, you know, you need to be thinking not just about 30, 60, 90 days. You need to be thinking about 3, 6, and 9 years. And that, you know, as a risk management professional, and to think of the many multitudes of risk, and to not only sit there and think about what might happen, but to actually advise and then implement initiatives to mitigate those risks. I think that's what really sets you up to be a good leader.
And we work together at Marsh, and to work for a giant corporate, a US corporate, it's all good experience. I've worked for partnerships and the big corporates, and I think you were saying earlier about it does sort of shape you, all these different experiences, and holds you in good stead. And from risk and insurance, you know, you're right now in SelfWealth. I mean, and from I know you were a digital transformation leader previously, but you're right at the cutting edge of technology now. Is there still some way for the risk and insurance industry, do you think, to catch up from a technology point of view?
Yeah, so I think so. And you know, as you point out, you know, I came originally based, you know, in placement, you know, so, you know, looking at probably more of the traditional types of insurance product offered, and then, you know, asked to make the transition to head up digital transformation for Marsh in the US. And, you know, it was that jump, I think, that really put things into perspective in terms of, you know, the way in which insurance product has been built historically has been based on data sets that have been built up over many years. And then, you know, you go forth and do your modeling and build the product, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, the way in which, you know, many organizations exist today is, you know, it's very much focused on what these new technologies are. In terms of both, you know, the risks and the opportunities that they may present to that given organisation. And so I think that from an insurance perspective, you know, there's still a mindset change that really needs to happen in terms of, you know, how do we properly look at what the risk is? You know, no two organisations are the same. You know, culturally, there's different ways to assess new tech, and, you know, the whole test and learn approach, and through agile methodologies, et cetera, it really does help to de-risk some of the tech decisions that people make. And not to forget, I mean, it's so rare these days that, you know, any technology is built in isolation. You know, every deployment will result in some kind of third party being involved, you know, whether they be a software provider, whether they're doing some cloud hosting. You know, there's always some component that a third party will actively have to be involved, and indeed you're reliant on them in a lot of ways. So, you know, what is the due diligence that sits behind that selection of that third party? And I think it's all of those factors when you're thinking about insurance cover from a technology point of view. Has that consideration really been given in each of the organisation's circumstance?
And it's funny hearing you, this sort of switch over from the provider to the receiver, being a customer to the risk and insurance industry now. Even now, you know, I can see your mindset has changed. It's the risks that the company faces by adopting the technology, but that is the same for the insurers and the brokers, and everyone's going through that same transition. And that, you know, the reliance, as you say, on a third party provider. But you know, I know I was watching you on Aussie TV being interviewed, and you know, your adoption of the cryptocurrencies, and in the end it's jumping in and giving it a go. And you know, there is always some risk, but it's actually
correct.
Just giving it a go and trying it.
Absolutely. And so, yes, SelfWealth is going to be launching, it's an Australian first, you know, launching the ability for our members to trade cryptocurrency. within an equities trading platform. So, for us, that is obviously a big decision as, we're continuing to develop the product. And one of the key decisions that we're making is, who do we partner with? The market now is flooded with, alternate crypto exchanges, crypto custodial models, etc. So, we of course want to safeguard the interests of our members. So making that decision is a big one. And, that requires as well a thorough understanding of the technology itself. And, understanding, there's many opportunities with crypto and indeed blockchain. But, I think that there's also a responsibility to ask what I call the common sense questions about any technology. Don't be afraid, don't be embarrassed to put your hand up and say, I don't really understand what that means, or I don't really understand how wrong this could go. And I think it's through that sort of thinking that, and I think insurers need to have that sort of mindset as well, so that people can really understand that the parameters of what we're doing here, and then, make the appropriate risk decisions.
There was someone actually that we used to work with at Marsh who started up a new firm, and they're looking at basically computable contracts, just trying to get the basic digital platform for the insurance policy, and then everything else can flow from it once you've got that core. But as you said, it's a change of mindset to do things in a different way, not just do what you did before, but do it electronically. It's
Correct.
actually just thinking about what you did before and how that might change. But yeah, it's and one of the other interviews that I've done actually with is he's head of incubation at Beasley, and he's got a very innovative mind as well. So, and there's a lot of insurers doing some good innovative work in terms of the products and services, but also the way they're doing things. So, the industry comes under a bit of criticism sometimes, but I think from an innovation point of view, I mean, we worked together. I'm just trying to work out how long ago it was when we were talking. It was the BI Centre of Excellence, and talking about non-damage business interruption all those years ago. I mean, we had no idea that infectious disease would, bring the world to a halt as it has. But we were talking about it as one of the issues on the list. And I think it's just getting everyone ready at the same time, isn't it? So in that instance, I think the insurance industry was ahead of the game, but weren't necessarily ready for it. And one of the questions actually I wanted to ask you was about, because you've traveled the world and worked in so many different places. And actually, I was looking on your LinkedIn profile and I saw Latin America as well. I hadn't realized that was pre-March, that was your Willis days. And you've worked for Dora as well. So you really have done all the different parts of the world and different parts of the industry. But we met in London, I said, and then it was Singapore. Did Latin America before that. US, and you're in Arizona, weren't you, for a number of years, and then back to Australia. So you've really experienced all these different parts of the world. But are there any sort of common issues that you see? It might, obviously, I talk a lot about risk and insurance, but it's business in general. Some sort of common issues in all of those countries, and we tend to think, are there any solutions that actually would fit them all as well?
Absolutely. So look, I've seen a lot of innovation in insurance across the world. There's no doubt, there are people who are constantly challenging, constantly thinking about how we can do it better, thinking about, particularly data from, not just, data available in their organizations, but what external data is available. I think that's probably the biggest change that I've seen, certainly in the last decade in insurance. And in terms of, the global reflection, there is absolutely we as humans, I think, are more similar than what we give ourselves credit for. What I would say is people crave stability. They crave taking care of their family. They crave feeling respected. and they crave feeling safe, and that's how it transcends into the business world, and also from a risk management perspective. And I think where we can all have alignment is this constant struggle between the short-term aims that are happening within any organization, 30, 60 days, versus what most of us know that we should be doing, which is to think further afield in terms of are we setting up our organizations for success in the next 3, 6, 9 years. I think they are common traits and common areas of focus that any organization faces, no matter where they are in the world. I think in terms of looking across the world for innovation, I think it's also fair to say that I've thoroughly enjoyed every single country that I've had the pleasure to live in. And I think each of those countries represent something unique in terms of, how people feel and how they act. My time in Latin America, I made many great friends in Latin America, which I still have today. Their joy of life, the ability to accept sometimes, life doesn't quite go as you would expect it to do, but they still pick themselves up and they move on, and, they make the very best out of situations. To, a wonderful time living in Singapore. I almost had to be dragged out of Singapore, and, the organization, the ability to think longer term as well. And I'd say that the earnestness of the Singaporeans is something that a lot of countries can reflect on. So I do strongly believe that each of my country experiences have taught me something about not only the business world, but myself.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember our discussions over in Singapore because I was struggling to understand why business interruption insurance wasn't as popular in Asia. And I remember this, a discussion, and it was, well, you really have to be a proper trusted advisor. People don't want to give out their profit and loss data, even to insurers. And so that's where part of it comes from, and that sort of deep-rooted difference. I was just, it's not until someone actually tells you something like that that you start to realize the difference across the world and the different approaches. But I think your comments earlier about sort of the safety aspects, and I always talk about, at the moment I'm trying to build up business and the team for Meaden and More in London. That's the new role for me. And I started in lockdown. So, for me, it's how do you show someone you're a safe pair of hands over a video screen? And it is difficult. And we're making some progress, but it's been difficult to do that. And you realize how much of it is the personal relationships and that trust part of it, and how quite often you do need that face-to-face interaction before you'll put your faith in someone. But also the horizons. So, we obviously both work for the large corporate, and it's very much, what the street thinks, and this month or this week or even today. But I'm back in a partnership arrangement now where the horizon is very different, and it's very much investing for the long term. And it's great that even though you're in a corporate situation, you've still got that longer term view as well as the short term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you have to have that if you are a responsible leader, no matter how strong the temptation is to only focus on the short term. The organization is only ever good as what it is when you leave it. And so it is about building out for the future, making sure there's capacity, making sure there's a runway for that further growth to occur. And particularly when you're leading a listed company, as I am, I have a duty and obligation to the shareholders, which I take great responsibility for. So I think those elements really do need to be balanced between the short, medium and long term.
And I'm also, it's obviously not as I'm not a CEO or anything like that, but I'm heading up the London office of Meaden and More, and they've put their trust in me to build the business and the team. But it's really lovely to have the support of the US and Canada, but know that, you know, I have the autonomy to grow the business. And we started off by talking about your responsibilities as CEO. That the speed of decision making is very different, I think, as from your perspective. It's you have your, as you say, you're accountable and responsible, but you're able to make quick decisions and make quick changes.
Correct. And look, you know, to come from a very, you know, highly structured, large organization with multi-layers, you know, to an organization which is much smaller, but, you know, as the CEO, you know, I find it liberating, you know, to make that, you know, as a leading Australian fintech, you know, that's exactly how it has to be. But, you know, even with that ability to make the quick decisions, that, you know, puts in more of a self-regulatory component in terms of, you know, have I asked all the questions that I should have to be able to make the correct decision? And I think that, you know, something as a fintech leader in such a fast-moving pace, you have to be collaborative. You know, you should not be making the sole decision by yourself. It's about stepping back, being humble, thinking, you know, who actually has the greatest knowledge in this particular area that I'm about to make this decision about, to listen, to reflect, but then ultimately to act. And then when you act at pace. That I think is what you need to do.
And any leader is a leader of something, and normally it's a leader of a team, isn't it? So it's listen to the team, and you're definitely trailblazing, and it's great to see not just a female in the CEO role, but also someone from risk and insurance. You know, we're all definitely cheering from the sidelines. And listen, I wish you all the well all the best in this new role. And I'm sure it sounds great, and you've got some wonderful opportunities. Have you got just one last thing? Are there any sort of hints and tips now that you were, I said earlier, you worked for an insurer, you've worked for a broker, and now you're working for a company. Are there any sort of tips for the risk and insurance industry from, you know, you see it from a different perspective?
Never stop asking questions.
Yeah, never take anything for granted. Funny enough, I did a presentation recently, and I said that we don't have all the answers, but it's more important to have the right questions. And so
spot on.
That's a great bit of advice. And listen, it's really nice to catch up, and clearly got the memo about red. Normally I try and wear blue, funny enough. Because
you've always had great taste, Caroline. I'm just going to say that.
Colours of blue, and I've like run out of blue tops. I need to get some new blue tops so that I went red. And actually, you got dressed before me, of course, because it's your evening. I must have copied you. But listen, I've taken up a lot of your time. But thank you ever so much for speaking to me today.
No, thank you for having me on. Appreciate it. Great to see you.
It's been really good to speak to you, and I think this is of interest to, you know, your transition and your world travels, and your insight is really useful for everyone in the industry. So thank you again.
No worries. Thanks, Caroline. Cheers.
So